Pinebrook Ridge was never meant to be extraordinary. Just a collection of modest homes with nearly identical facades, differentiated only by subtle variations in paint colors and garden arrangements. All approved by the HOA, of course. Our house sat at the end of Maple Drive, a simple two-story with fatting blue siding and a wheelchair ramp that carved a gentle slope to our front door. Nothing spectacular, but it was ours, and for the most part, we loved it. My brother Leo was born with spina bifida. At 16, 4 years younger than me, he navigated the world on wheels with a resilience that sometimes took my breath away. His wide smile and unfiltered laugh could disarm the most hardened heart. Well, almost any heart. Leo collected comic books, drew elaborate chalk landscapes on our driveway, and dreamed of designing video games someday. My mother worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse's aide, determined to provide for us after our father's sudden heart attack 3 years ago. We kept to ourselves mostly, not out of unfriendliness but necessity. Mom was either working or exhausted from working. I balanced community college classes with part-time jobs and helping Leo. We were not the picture-perfect family that Pinebrook Ridge seemed to demand, but we were solid. We had each other. And we had Uncle James, Mom's brother, who lived just one town over. Uncle James wore his sheriff's badge with quiet authority. He would stop by unannounced, often bringing pizza or Chinese takeout, checking on us without making it obvious that was what he was doing. Just in the neighborhood, he would say, though we knew better. Those evenings were bright spots, moments when Mom would actually sit down, when the weight seemed to lift temporarily from her shoulders. The first note appeared 3 weeks after we installed the wheelchair ramp. A pink paper slipped into our mailbox, the handwriting precise and slanted. Unapproved structural modifications must be removed within 14 days. HOA Violation 37B. It was signed Marlene Tisdale, HOA President. No greeting, no consideration for why the ramp might be necessary. Mom called the number listed at the bottom. She explained Leo's condition, offered to provide medical documentation. The response was cold and immediate. Rules are rules. The aesthetic integrity of Pinebrook Ridge must be maintained. File the proper paperwork and await approval. The approval that would take months if it came at all. More notes followed. Our mailbox was non-compliant blue instead of Pinebrook-approved navy. Our flower beds were excessively wild and reduced property values. Each note carried the same signature, Marlene Tisdale, though everyone in the neighborhood simply called her Karen behind her back. A woman in her 50s with a blonde bob that never moved and small eyes that measured every infraction. I saw her watching our house sometimes, clipboard in hand, cataloging our failures. She drove a white Lexus SUV that gleamed even on cloudy days, patrolling the streets of Pinebrook like a sentinel. At community gatherings, she spoke in a voice that commanded rather than conversed, her smile never reaching her eyes. One evening, Mom approached her after an HOA meeting. I stood nearby, pretending to check my phone but straining to hear their conversation. "Ms. Tisdale, about the ramp situation," my mother began, her voice soft but steady. "My son cannot enter our home without it. Surely there must be some accommodation under accessibility laws." Karen's expression did not change. "Your personal situation is unfortunate, but not the concern of the HOA. Rules maintain property values. Submit the proper variance forms, pay the processing fee, and the board will consider your request at the quarterly meeting." She turned away before Mom could respond, effectively dismissing years of maternal struggle in a single gesture. That night, Leo called out to me from his bedroom. When I went in, his face was pale in the moonlight streaming through his window. "Alex," he whispered, "that lady was looking in our backyard with a flashlight." I parted the curtains just in time to see a beam of light sweeping across our back deck, illuminating Leo's potted tomato plants and the basketball hoop we had installed at wheelchair height. The light lingered on the ramp leading to our back door, then vanished. In its place, I caught the silhouette of a woman with a rigid bob, slipping between houses like a ghost. Something cold settled in my stomach that night. This was not simple rule enforcement. This was something personal, something obsessive, something that would not stop with notes and fines. The morning mail brought an official HOA envelope, thicker than the usual notes. Inside was a formal violation notice and a fine for $500. Unauthorized permanent structure, ramp installed without approval. Another fine for $150 followed, non-compliant mailbox color. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Further violations will result in additional penalties and possible legal action. Mom sat at our kitchen table, the papers spread before her, her face lined with exhaustion. Her nursing scrub still carried the antiseptic smell of the hospital. She had just finished a 12-hour night shift, and now this. "We cannot afford these fines," she said quietly, not looking up. "And the process to fight them requires a hearing, which I cannot attend without missing work." I felt the anger building inside me. This is discrimination. The ramp is for Leo. They cannot legally stop us. Mom smiled weakly. "Legal battles require money and time. We have neither." That evening, I was helping Leo with his homework when my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in the Pinebrook Ridge Facebook group. The post, from Marlene Tisdale herself, did not mention us by name, but her meaning was crystal clear. Residents are reminded that all exterior modifications require prior approval. Disability status does not exempt households from maintaining neighborhood standards. Special accommodations can be made appropriately and attractively with proper planning. Certain homes on Maple Drive have become eyesores and diminish all our property values. Comments flooded in, most expressing agreement. A few brave souls asked for clarification or suggested compassion, but they were quickly shouted down by Karen's allies, a small but vocal group of homeowners who seemed to have nothing better to do than police their neighbors' lives. The following Saturday, Leo asked to sit outside. The spring air was warm, and he wanted to read his comics in the sunshine. I helped him navigate the ramp down to our small front yard, setting up his portable table under the oak tree. He looked happy, peaceful. It lasted exactly 23 minutes. The white Lexus screeched to a halt in front of our house. Karen emerged, designer sunglasses perched on her head, a Pinebrook Ridge HOA manual clutched in her manicured hand like a weapon. "This is a violation," she announced loudly, not bothering with a greeting. "Personal items cannot be stored in front yards. This includes temporary furniture." Leo looked up, confusion and hurt crossing his face. "I am just reading." "And creating an unsightly display," she retorted, gesturing toward his wheelchair and table. "The manual clearly states that yards must be maintained for aesthetic consistency." I stepped forward. "He has every right to enjoy our property." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Your family has accumulated numerous violations already. Do not compound them with belligerence. The noise from this area has been disturbing neighbors all morning." The noise had been nothing more than Leo's occasional laugh at his comic book. I felt my fists clench but forced myself to remain calm for Leo's sake. "We will be sure to review the manual," I said through gritted teeth. She stared at us for a long moment before walking back to her car. "See that you do," she called over her shoulder. "Further documentation of violations is ongoing." 2 days later, we woke to find our front porch splattered with broken eggs, the yolks congealing on the wooden ramp. No witnesses, of course. Nothing that could be proven. But the message was clear enough. I called Uncle James that afternoon, my voice shaking with suppressed rage as I explained the escalating situation. "This is harassment," he agreed, his tone grim. "But without clear evidence linking her to the vandalism, my hands are tied legally. Document everything. Dates, times, witnesses if possible." "Nobody will speak against her," I said. "They are all afraid of becoming her next target." At the monthly HOA meeting, Karen sat at the head table, radiating smug authority as she detailed the problem properties in the neighborhood. She never named us directly, but her gaze constantly drifted to where Mom sat, shoulders squared despite her exhaustion. The other residents avoided eye contact with us, their silence a fortress protecting the status quo. One older gentleman did approach us afterward, speaking in a near whisper. "She did the same to the Rodriguez family last year. They had a child with autism who made too much noise, according to her. They ended up moving." That night I made a decision. I ordered a small security camera and installed it discreetly near our front door. I downloaded a voice recording app on my phone and made sure it was always charged. I started a detailed journal of every interaction, every note, every fine. Karen would glare at us from her perfectly manicured lawn as we came and went. Sometimes she would pointedly take photographs of our house with her phone. Once, I caught her measuring the width of our ramp with a tape measure, muttering to herself. The atmosphere in Pinebrook Ridge grew heavier with each passing day. Leo began asking to stay inside, away from the windows. Mom developed a nervous habit of checking the mailbox repeatedly, dreading the next official envelope. And I watched and waited and documented, because something told me that Karen was just getting started. Her campaign against us was building toward something bigger, something worse. Spring had fully arrived in Pinebrook Ridge, bringing with it warm afternoons and blooming dogwoods. After weeks of staying inside, Leo begged to go out and draw with his sidewalk chalk, a simple pleasure that no 16-year-old should have to plead for. I helped him into his wheelchair and down the ramp, setting a box of colorful chalk beside him on the smooth concrete of our driveway. "Stay where I can see you from the kitchen window," I told him, ruffling his hair. "I need to start dinner before Mom gets home." His face lit up with genuine joy for the first time in weeks. "I am going to draw a dragon, a really big one." For half an hour, everything was peaceful. From the kitchen, I could see Leo bent over his artwork, tongue poking out in concentration as he created an elaborate fantasy landscape. Blues and greens and purples spread across the concrete in sweeping arcs. The sound of his humming drifted through the open window, and I found myself smiling as I chopped vegetables for a stir-fry. Then came the screeching of tires, the slam of a car door, a voice that had become the soundtrack of our anxiety. "What do you think you are doing? This is common property." I dropped the knife and ran toward the front door, my heart pounding. Through the window, I could see Karen standing over Leo, her face contorted with rage, pointing at the chalk drawings that had spilled slightly onto the sidewalk in front of our house. "The sidewalk is HOA property. This is vandalism, destruction of community assets." Leo looked up at her, confusion and fear evident in his expression. "I am sorry, I did not know. I can wash it off." "You most certainly will, and your family will be fined for this deliberate violation." Karen gesticulated wildly, her designer bracelet catching the afternoon sunlight. I was halfway to the front door when I saw her bend down, scooping up a handful of decorative rocks from our neighbor's landscaping. My pace quickened to a run. "This is what I think of your vandalism," she shouted, and before I could reach them, she had thrown the first rock. It clattered against Leo's wheelchair. Leo flinched, trying to wheel backward away from her rage. But Karen was not finished. She threw another rock, then another. One struck Leo's shoulder, hard enough that he cried out in pain and shock. The force of his movement to avoid the next projectile unbalanced his wheelchair. It tipped, and Leo tumbled onto the concrete, landing amid his shattered chalk drawings. His scream tore through the quiet neighborhood. I crashed through the front door, my vision tunneling until all I could see was my brother on the ground and the woman still standing over him, another rock clutched in her fist. "What have you done?" I shouted, dropping to my knees beside Leo. His elbow was scraped and bleeding. Tears streamed down his face. "What is wrong with you?" Karen took a step back, but her expression remained defiant. He was vandalizing community property. I was protecting our neighborhood standards. By throwing rocks at a disabled teenager. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, strangled and raw. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "I need police at 742 Maple Drive, Pinebrook Ridge. A woman has assaulted my disabled brother." The dispatcher's calm voice asked me to stay on the line. Karen's eyes widened slightly, but she did not retreat. "He fell on his own," she said loudly enough for the dispatcher to hear. "I witnessed him defacing community property and informed him of the violation. Any injuries were self-inflicted when he improperly operated his wheelchair." Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. They stood at a distance, watching but not approaching, not helping. Their faces showed concern, shock, even sympathy, but no one stepped forward to contradict Karen's version of events. The police arrived 7 minutes later. By then, I had helped Leo back into his wheelchair and applied antiseptic to his scrapes from our first aid kit. He was still trembling, his drawings ruined by tears and blood. 2 officers approached us, their expressions carefully neutral. One spoke with Karen while the other took my statement. When I explained what had happened, the rocks, the assault, the officer's face remained impassive. "Did anyone else witness this?" he asked. I gestured to the neighbors. They all came out afterward. "But did anyone see the alleged rock-throwing incident?" I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "No, but..." "Without witnesses or video evidence, this becomes a case of conflicting accounts," the officer explained, not unkindly. "We cannot make an arrest based solely on..." He was interrupted by the arrival of another police vehicle. Uncle James stepped out, still in his sheriff's uniform, his face a mask of professional composure. He must have heard the call on his radio. He approached slowly, nodding to the local officers. "I understand there has been an incident involving my nephew." One of the officers explained the situation in low tones. Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, a picture of righteous indignation. When she realized Uncle James was related to us, her expression flickered momentarily. "I should recuse myself due to the conflict of interest," Uncle James said formally. "But I would like to remind everyone that security cameras are increasingly common in residential areas." His gaze swept the surrounding houses. Footage would be admissible evidence in any investigation. Karen's posture stiffened further. This juvenile delinquent was vandalizing community property. I was serving in my capacity as HOA president to address the violation. Uncle James looked at her steadily. "Ma'am, regardless of any perceived violation, throwing objects at a minor, particularly one with disabilities, would constitute assault. If such events occurred, they would be taken very seriously by law enforcement." The local officers completed their report. Without video evidence or witnesses willing to come forward, they could not proceed with charges against Karen. They advised both parties to avoid further contact and left with promises to follow up if more evidence emerged. As they drove away, Karen's composure returned fully. She looked down at Leo, then at me, her smile cold. The HOA board will be discussing this incident at our next meeting. Expect formal censure for the vandalism and false accusations. When she was gone, Uncle James knelt beside Leo, his official demeanor softening. "Are you all right, buddy?" Leo nodded, though his lower lip still trembled. "She said I was ruining everything." Uncle James helped us inside. Once Leo was settled with an ice pack on his bruised shoulder, my uncle pulled me aside. "This has gone too far," he said quietly. "But I cannot intervene officially without clear evidence. It would look like abuse of power." I nodded, anger and determination crystallizing into something hard and clear within me. "I understand, and I know exactly what to do next." After Uncle James left, I walked to our neighbor's house across the street. Mr. Peterson was a retired security consultant who had mentioned his property surveillance system at a block party months ago. I had never been more thankful for that casual conversation than I was at that moment. Mr. Peterson answered his door on the third knock, his silver hair disheveled as if he had been napping. Recognition crossed his face, followed by concern. "Alex Wright, I saw the police earlier. Everything okay?" I explained the situation as concisely as I could, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to anger. When I finished, he invited me inside without hesitation. "My security system covers most of the street," he said, leading me to a small home office. 4 cameras, motion-activated, high definition. I installed them after my car was vandalized last year. He sat at his computer, clicking through folders of archived footage. "Here we go, today starting around 4:15 p.m. The footage was crystal clear. From this angle we could see Leo working peacefully on his chalk drawings. We could see Karen's Lexus arrive, her aggressive posture as she confronted him. And there, unmistakable, we could see her bend down, gather the rocks, and throw them directly at Leo. The video captured the moment one struck his shoulder, his wheelchair tipping, his fall. "My God," Mr. Peterson murmured, "that woman needs help." "She needs consequences," I replied, my voice steady. "May I have a copy of this footage?" He transferred the video file to my USB drive without hesitation. "Use it however you need to. That boy of yours did not deserve that. None of you do." That evening, after ensuring Leo was asleep, I called Uncle James. "I have proof," I told him. "Video evidence, clear as day." He came over immediately, still in his uniform. We sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open between us, and I played the footage. His expression remained neutral, but I noticed his jaw tightening, the slight narrowing of his eyes. When the video ended, he was silent for a long moment. Then he looked up at me, and something had changed in his face. The careful impartiality of a law enforcement officer giving way to the protective instinct of family. "Send me this file," he said quietly. "Do not share it with anyone else yet. I need to follow proper procedure here, but I promise you this will not be ignored." "Can you arrest her now?" I asked. He shook his head slightly. "It is not that simple. I need to recuse myself and pass this to another jurisdiction to avoid any appearance of bias." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Trust me. Let me handle this the right way." The next morning, I received another HOA violation notice in our mailbox. This one cited unauthorized recording of community areas and harassment of HOA leadership. Karen had somehow learned about my visit to Mr. Peterson, though she could not have known about the footage itself. Despite Uncle James's advice, I made a decision. The community needed to see what kind of person was leading their HOA. I created an anonymous account and posted the video to the neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption. "This happened yesterday on Maple Drive. This is our HOA president attacking a disabled teenager for drawing with chalk." Within hours, the video had spread through every digital channel in Pinebrook Ridge. Comments exploded, most expressing shock and outrage. A few HOA board members reached out to my mother privately, apologizing for not intervening sooner, claiming they had not known the extent of Karen's behavior. Karen attempted damage control, posting a long statement about contextual misunderstandings and her dedication to preserving community standards. But the video spoke for itself. Families with children we had never spoken to stopped by with cards for Leo. An elderly couple brought a homemade casserole. The neighborhood landscape was shifting, fault lines appearing in what had seemed like solid support for Karen's regime. By evening, 3 HOA board members had publicly resigned their positions, citing irreconcilable differences in leadership philosophy. Karen's carefully constructed power base was crumbling. She showed up at our door that night, mascara smeared, demanding we take down the doctored video. Mom refused to open the door, instead speaking through it calmly. "The video shows exactly what happened, Marlene. There is nothing to discuss." "You have no idea who you are dealing with," Karen hissed, loud enough for us to hear through the door. "This neighborhood was perfect before your family brought it down." As she stormed back to her car, I noticed other neighbors watching from windows and porches, their silence now feeling less like fear and more like judgment, not of us, but of her. The balance had shifted. Karen must have felt it too, because her normally perfect posture seemed brittle as she drove away, her headlights cutting through the gathering darkness like searchlights from a sinking ship. The Pinebrook Ridge Community Center was never designed to hold the entire neighborhood. It was a modest building with a main meeting room that comfortably seated 50 people. On the night of the emergency HOA meeting, over 100 residents packed the space, standing along walls and spilling into the small lobby. The air was thick with tension and the mingled sense of perfume, aftershave, and anxiety. Mom and I sat in the front row. Leo had opted to stay home, still shaken by recent events. Karen had arrived early, establishing herself at the center table with remaining board members flanking her, though they maintained a noticeable distance. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawlessly applied, but her eyes darted nervously around the room. Before the meeting officially began, she approached us, voice pitched low but intense. "You need to retract your defamatory statements immediately," she said, leaning close to my mother. "That video has been edited to misrepresent my actions. I will pursue legal remedies if this slander continues." Mom looked up at her calmly. "The video shows what happened, Marlene. My son has the bruises to prove it." "Your son was vandalizing community property." "He was drawing with washable chalk," I interjected, "and nothing justifies throwing rocks at a disabled teenager." Karen's face flushed. "I will not be lectured by." She was interrupted by the interim HOA vice president calling the meeting to order. The agenda was simple: addressing recent community concerns and voting on whether to retain the current HOA president. Karen presented her case first, her voice strained as she detailed her years of dedicated service and commitment to maintaining property values. She characterized the incident with Leo as a misunderstanding and portrayed our family as persistent rule breakers who refused to work within established guidelines. When it was our turn to speak, Mom simply stood and asked me to play the video on the projector. The room fell silent as Leo's assault played out in high definition for everyone to see. Someone in the back gasped audibly. One of the remaining board members closed his eyes, unable to watch. After the video ended, Mom spoke briefly about our experience since moving to Pinebrook Ridge, the harassment, the excessive fines, the escalating hostility. She did not raise her voice or make accusations beyond what the evidence showed. She did not need to. The vote was almost unanimous. Karen was removed from the HOA presidency effective immediately, with further review of her board membership pending. As the results were announced, something in her seemed to snap. She rose from her chair, face contorted. "This is a coordinated attack," she shouted, pointing at various residents. "You will all regret this. Property values will plummet without proper oversight. Your precious neighborhood will descend into chaos." The interim vice president tried to restore order, but Karen was beyond calming. She swept her papers from the table, sending them flying across the room. "Years of service, and this is the thanks I get, from people who cannot even maintain basic standards." She stalked out, slamming the door behind her. The meeting concluded shortly after, with the vice president promising a return to reasonable and compassionate enforcement of HOA rules. 2 days later, I woke to the sound of air hissing from tires. Looking out my bedroom window, I saw our family car slumped to one side, the front tire completely flat. And there, retreating across our lawn in the pre-dawn light, was a familiar silhouette. I grabbed my phone and recorded her returning to her Lexus, a small knife glinting in her hand. This time when I called Uncle James, his response was immediate. "Send me the new footage, and Alex, be careful. She is escalating in a concerning pattern." That night, Karen began her patrols. Neighbors reported seeing her walking the streets after midnight, flashlight in hand, notebook tucked under her arm. She was documenting violations, real or imagined, muttering to herself as she moved from house to house. When confronted, she would claim she was exercising her rights as a homeowner to monitor community standards. Mom installed additional security cameras and a motion sensor light. We started taking different routes home, checking over our shoulders when we went for walks. The oppression we had felt for months was transforming into something more immediate and frightening. The unpredictability of someone who felt she had nothing left to lose. "She slashed our tires," I told Mr. Peterson when he asked about the police car he had seen at our house. "We have it on video." He shook his head grimly. "That woman has lost touch with reality. Be careful. People like that, they do not see consequences until they are facing them directly." I did not know, then, how prophetic his words would prove to be. The reconstituted HOA board called an emergency meeting to address the escalating situation with Karen and establish new leadership. Notices went out to all Pinebrook Ridge residents, including Karen, though few expected her to attend. The community center was set up with extra chairs, water pitchers on side tables, and a table at the front for the interim board members. Mom and I arrived early. This time, Leo had insisted on coming. "I am not hiding anymore," he had said with quiet determination. I wheeled him to a spot at the end of the front row where his chair would not block the aisle. Residents filled the room gradually, their conversations hushed but intense. Many stopped to greet Leo, offering gentle words of support or simply a compassionate smile. The atmosphere was charged but unified, a community finally acknowledging its collective failure to act sooner. The meeting was scheduled to begin at 7:00 p.m. At 7:00, 02. As the interim vice president approached the microphone, the door crashed open. Karen stood in the doorway, designer handbag clutched like a shield, face flushed with either anger or alcohol, possibly both. Her normally perfect appearance had slipped. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her blouse buttoned incorrectly at the top. "I demand to be heard," she announced, striding to the center of the room. "This illegal meeting violates HOA bylaws regarding proper notification periods." The interim vice president, Mr. Steinberg, spoke calmly. "Ms. Tisdale, you were notified along with all residents. We are proceeding according to the emergency provisions in Article 8. "Engineered by you conspirators," she snapped, turning to face the audience. "You think removing me solves your problems. I built this neighborhood into something valuable. Before me, this was just another declining suburb. I enforce standards none of you had the spine to maintain." Her voice rose with each sentence, echoing off the walls of the suddenly silent room. Leo shrank back in his wheelchair. I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling his tension. Mr. Steinberg tried again. "Ms. Tisdale, you are welcome to stay and participate appropriately, but we must proceed with—" "Appropriate?" she laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. Was it appropriate when the Henderson family painted their garage door sunset orange instead of approved terracotta? Was it appropriate when the Millers installed unauthorized solar panels? Was it appropriate when this family, she jabbed a finger toward us, installed an eyesore of a ramp without permission? Someone in the back called out. It was a wheelchair ramp for a disabled teenager, for God's sake. Karen whirled toward the voice. "Rules exist for a reason. Once you allow one exception, the whole system crumbles. Look around, it is already happening. Next will come decreased property values, increased crime, neighborhood decline." Mr. Steinberg stepped out from behind the table. "Marlene, please take a seat or allow us to continue the meeting." "You do not have the authority to tell me what to do," she shouted, moving closer to him. "I am still a homeowner here. I still have rights." At that moment, the door opened again. Uncle James entered in his sheriff's uniform, accompanied by one of his deputies. He had mentioned nothing about attending when I spoke to him earlier. He nodded to me briefly before scanning the room with a professional gaze. "We received calls about a disturbance," he stated calmly. "Everything all right here?" Karen turned to face him, recognition flashing in her eyes. "This is a private HOA meeting. Law enforcement presence is neither required nor welcome." "We are just responding to concerned citizens' calls, ma'am," Uncle James replied evenly. "If everything is proceeding peacefully, we will wait outside." "This is intimidation," Karen declared, voice rising again. "This is his family," she pointed at us. "This is a conflict of interest. This is corruption." Uncle James maintained his professional demeanor. "Ma'am, I would suggest lowering your voice and either participating appropriately or allowing the meeting to proceed without disruption." "Or what? You will arrest me for speaking the truth, for trying to protect my community from people who do not belong here." The room had gone completely still. Even the usual creaks and shuffles of a crowd had ceased. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. "No one is going to be arrested for expressing opinions," Uncle James said. "But if you continue to disrupt a lawful assembly, that would be a different matter." "Lawful?" Karen's voice had risen to a near scream. "Nothing about this coup is lawful. This meeting violates at least 7 HOA bylaws." Uncle James sighed, glancing at his deputy. "Ms. Tisdale, I am going to ask you once more to either take a seat or step outside until you can participate calmly." She stepped closer to him, finger raised inches from his face. "You cannot silence me. You cannot protect them forever. This neighborhood was perfect until they came." "Step back, ma'am," Uncle James said, his voice still level but carrying a new note of warning. Instead, Karen did something no one expected. She shoved him. It was not a powerful push. She was a small woman compared to my uncle's solid frame, but the intent was unmistakable. Her hands connected with his chest, forcing him to take a small step backward. The deputy moved forward immediately. Uncle James held up a hand, stopping him, his expression unchanged except for a slight tightening around his eyes. "Marlene Tisdale, you are under arrest for assaulting a law enforcement officer," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. He recited her rights as he gently but firmly turned her around, securing her wrists with handcuffs. Karen seemed unable to process what was happening. "You cannot. Do you know who I am? I am the president of—" "Former president," someone murmured from the audience. As Uncle James and his deputy escorted her from the room, Karen continued protesting, her voice growing more desperate. "This is a conspiracy. I was protecting our community. You will all regret this. Property values will collapse without me." The door closed behind them, cutting off her voice. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mr. Steinberg cleared his throat. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "shall we proceed with the meeting?" A ripple of nervous laughter broke the tension. As the meeting resumed, I glanced out the window to see Uncle James carefully helping Karen into the back of his patrol car, her face visible through the window, shocked, as if she still could not believe this was happening to her. Leo turned to me, his eyes wide. "Is it over?" he whispered. I squeezed his shoulder gently. "I think it might be, buddy. I really think it might be." The charges against Karen, or Marlene Tisdale, as the court documents formally named her, included assault on a law enforcement officer, vandalism, harassment, and assault of a minor. The evidence against her was substantial. Multiple video recordings, witness statements, and her own public behavior at the HOA meeting. She accepted a plea agreement that included community service, mandatory anger management counseling, and a restraining order prohibiting her from approaching our family or attending HOA meetings for 1 year. Spring blossomed into summer in Pinebrook Ridge. The transformation of the neighborhood was as remarkable as the changing season. The interim board, led by Mr. Steinberg, immediately waived all pending fines against our family and formally approved our wheelchair ramp with a unanimous vote. They established a new committee specifically focused on accessibility and inclusion within the community, with Leo invited to serve as a youth representative. One warm Saturday in June, neighbors gathered for what was billed as a community renewal project. Children and adults alike spread out along the sidewalks with buckets of chalk, creating an explosion of color and creativity through the neighborhood. Leo was at the center of it all, demonstrating his dragon drawing techniques to a group of admiring kids who had never spoken to him before. "This is your vision," Mom said quietly as we watched him laugh with his new friends. "You made this happen." I shook my head. We all did. We just needed to stand together instead of staying silent. The HOA rules were systematically reviewed and revised over the summer. Reasonable standards remained, but the punitive enforcement structure was dismantled in favor of community assistance for those struggling to maintain their properties. When the elderly couple at the end of Oak Street could not manage their lawn due to health issues, a rotating schedule of volunteer help emerged without prompting. When the Singh family needed to install a solar water heater for religious reasons, the board expedited approval instead of creating obstacles. One evening in late August, I drove to Uncle James's house with a homemade apple pie, Mom's specialty and his favorite. He welcomed me inside, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in months, out of uniform in jeans and a faded college t-shirt. "How is Leo doing?" he asked as he cut generous slices of pie. "Better every day," I replied. "He is talking about starting a neighborhood gaming club. Kids from 3 streets over want to join." Uncle James nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Good, that is good to hear." "I never properly thanked you," I said after a moment, "for everything you did." He looked up, his expression serious. "You do not need to thank me. Family takes care of family, always has, always will." He paused, then added, "But what you did, standing up, gathering evidence, protecting your brother, that took real courage. I am proud of you, Alex." The next weekend, Pinebrook Ridge held its first Neighborhood Unity Festival. Tables lined the community center parking lot, laden with potluck dishes representing diverse cultural backgrounds. Children played tag between clusters of talking adults. Music drifted from speakers set up near an impromptu dance floor. Leo had spent days preparing for this moment. With careful concentration, he maneuvered his wheelchair to the exact spot on the sidewalk where he had fallen months earlier. I watched from a few feet away as he uncapped his special chalk pens, professional grade ones gifted by the art teacher at his school who had heard his story. With precise movements, he began to write on the concrete, not drawing this time, but lettering in bold, vibrant colors. When he finished, he wheeled back slightly to survey his work. Other neighbors noticed and gathered around, murmuring approval. There on the sidewalk, at the exact spot where cruelty had once reigned, now glowed a single word in rainbow hues: hope. As Leo looked up at me, his smile radiant in the summer sunshine, I realized that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from refusing to let them defeat your spirit. Pinebrook Ridge was not perfect. No community ever is, but it was healing. And sometimes that is enough.